Van Damme has countless stories to tell, most of them entertaining fairy tales crafted for his loyal fans who are happy to believe every word. But if you are here, I bet you might have few doubts about his tales, and rightfully so. Don't worry, we are not going to dive into his remarkable career as a whole. For now, we'll focus on one specific episode that over years has spawned numerous interpretations and anecdotal facts, eventually reaching legendary status: his brief dance as the original Predator. It is not just about the fact that he briefly played the creature, it's about how and why, to Jean-Claude's relief, he was fired from the movie. Yes, you heard that right, Van Damme wanted out of Predator, and his career depended on it. Most interestingly, we will explore who gave him the perfect idea of how to exit the project in the most tactical and career-preserving way possible. The real story? It's even better than the myth. And so, with the hand-cranked camera ready to roll, let's unravel the tale of what truly happened on the set of Predator. There are a few popular theories about how Van Damme lost his role as a Predator. One version suggests that Van Damme's usual difficulties, stemming from his temper and behavior, potentially influenced by his bipolar disorder, led to the director finally losing patience and firing him. However, this theory does not hold much weight. At that time, Van Damme was still at the beginning of his career, trying to break into the industry. Bloodsport hadn't been made yet, and he didn't have the celebrity status to engage in any dramatic antics. Van Damme had only few short appearances in films at that point and was on his best behavior, as his career prospects were riding on those early opportunities. Any missteps could have destroyed his chances of getting another role, let alone one as a lead role. And so the idea that he behaved like a spoiled teenager is out of the question. The second theory is that Van Damme wasn't thrilled with the idea of wearing a suit that concealed his face, thereby reducing his on-screen exposure. While there is some truth to this statement, it wouldn't have been a strong enough reason for him to leave the set in mid-1980s. At that point in his career, Jean-Claude was far from household name and understood that any role was just another stepping stone towards his ultimate goal of fame. Additionally, being part of film featuring Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was already ascending to mega-star status, would have been a massive opportunity. Just the bragging rights of sharing a set with a superstar would have kept Van Damme motivated to do whatever was asked of him. Those connections and associations, also known as bragging rights, were crucial in Hollywood, especially when negotiating future roles. Van Damme's ability to spin his involvement in high-profile projects helped him secure roles in films like Bloodsport. So, while not showing his face wasn't ideal, it wasn't the deal-breaker that ended his participation in Predator. It simply wasn't the critical factor. The third popular theory is that Jean-Claude Van Damme was so ineffective in portraying the Predator that he was let go to avoid wasting the crew's time and the production budget. This explanation is actually much closer to the truth, but the underlying reason for his challenges on set were rooted in something far more complex. It's worth noting that actual reasons were kept under wraps at the time, as Van Damme wanted to avoid damaging his promising career. Public didn't need to know, and Jean-Claude also preferred to keep those details hidden from producers and directors in the film industry, especially during the early days when he was working tirelessly to establish his reputation. Before Van Damme was cast as the Predator, the filmmakers were exploring how to bring the alien creature to life. Their initial version involved a more insect-like, fast-moving creature that relied on agility rather than brute strength. Sounds familiar? Of course it does! Ridley Scott's Alien and James Cameron's Aliens had set the gold standard for the out-of-space monsters, and their influence was inescapable. The shadow of xenomorph loomed large, making it nearly impossible for filmmakers to avoid drawing inspiration from its iconic design. The final decision to cast Jean-Claude Van Damme as the Predator was primarily driven by one of the film's producers, Joel Silver. He envisioned a fast, agile alien that moved in a way distinctly different from humans. Van Damme and his friend, Michel Kissy, were regular readers of Drama Lodge, a weekly publishing listing acting opportunities. When they spotted a casting call for a martial artist to play a major role, they jumped at the chance. During his audition, Jean-Claude demonstrated his martial arts skills which perfectly matched what the producers and directors were seeking at the time: a deadly, karate-savvy cockroach ninja chasing commandos through the jungle. While the concept seemed promising on paper, everything changed when studio executives reviewed the early footage of this concept. That was some spectacular disappointment. Few executives' bodies fainted counting the amount of money lost on the failure of a concept. The alien red suit alone cost them over $1 million. Anyways, back to the jungle. Crew and other actors weren't too kind towards the original alien design either, and Van Damme was getting mocked by association on a daily basis. You may have heard that Arnold Schwarzenegger found the original Predator design laughable, likening it to a lizard suit with the head of a duck. That didn't help much to boost Jean-Claude's morale and indirectly placed Van Damme in a rough position since he had to operate within that ineffective costume. Bill Duke, who played Mac, was constantly pointing out that Van Damme simply couldn't meet physical demands to operate the costume. The suit was incredibly hot and cumbersome, leading to dehydration issues for Van Damme and making him faint multiple times on set, or so Bill thought. Remember, most of the actors in Predator were tough guys, alpha males with brutal appearances and a no-mercy attitude towards any kind of suffering. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bill Duke, Jesse Ventura, Sonny Landham, absurdly over-the-top characters not only in the movies but in real life as well. To them, the misery of working in harsh jungle environment was just part of the job. The harder the better, as long as it makes the final cut worth the experience. Naturally, they viewed Van Damme's frequent complaints about the heat and the costume as whiny, wimpy tantrums. And then there was Jesse Ventura, who thought everyone besides him were Boy Scouts, not worth a dime if this had been a real combat situation. But that's Jesse for you. Nothing quite matches the ego of a man who could rival Galacticus in sheer self-regard. There was just one crew member who knew exactly what was going on and why Jean-Claude made every take painful and miserable for himself and everyone else on set. You may have noticed that in the list of tough guys I did not mention Carl Weathers. He always believed that one should work not just hard, but smart on set, and that pain and suffering aren't exactly mandatory requirements to be a good actor. While others macheted their way through the jungle, he would rather let the professionals do the job. Sometimes I wonder if that one scene in the movie was actually mocking Carl for his general attitude towards hard labor during film production.
Instead of complaining, maybe I should help.
Okay, it could be just an unrelated joke. After all, Carl was widely considered a hard-working actor with a strong work ethic, unless someone like Dolph Lundgren punches him full speed in Rocky IV, but that's a whole different story. So why so much attention to Carl Weathers, you may wonder? Well, his vast knowledge of how to milk the system and navigate the murky waters of Hollywood inner relationships was the reason behind Van Damme's behavior on set, wearing that ridiculous red suit. He was the genius who explained and taught Jean-Claude how to get out of the sticky situation with a movie he did not want to be in. When Van Damme was practicing his skills in a lousy parody of the alien xenomorph, he also landed the role of his life, the movie that propelled his career into the stratosphere. It was called Bloodsport. I think you've heard of that film, right? Jean-Claude and his buddy Michel Kissy finally convinced the boss of the Canon Group, Menahem Golan, to cast Van Damme as Friend Dukes in Bloodsport. If you want to know the full story, and it's a good one, see the link in the description. It's a story worthy of its own film. So now that Van Damme had the Bloodsport script and a role in his hands, he had a dilemma to solve. His contractual obligations to the Predator movie were still in place while Bloodsport was set in motion. He had to somehow drop from the Predator cast and move to Hong Kong for the Bloodsport shoot. Sure, simply walking up to producer and director and saying, "Off I go, good luck and see ya," would have been a career-ending move. This isn't something you can do unless you are a super mega star and the producers are willing to swallow your attitude and roll over to keep you happy. Everything is good and bearable as long as the money is floating into the boss's pocket. Nobody knew how well Bloodsport would do, so this wasn't the time for Jean-Claude to test his luck. Michel Kissy and Van Damme were sobbing over the tough decision when one day they ran into Carl Weathers, who was in his usual chirpy mood and happy to chat. Kissy and Claude poured their souls out, crying on Carl's shoulder about how much they would love to break Jean-Claude Predator contract and pursue their dreams in martial arts movies, but had no idea how to depart from Predator without dire consequences. Well, when it comes to finding an elegant solution to break a deal without breaking someone's, in this case director's, heart, Carl was your man. "You don't quit the movie," Carl said. "You never do that. It will destroy your reputation in a blink of an eye. Instead, you get fired." That's right. In Hollywood, being incompetent gains more points than walking away from signed contract. It's one thing if you aren't the best fit for the role. It may not be even your fault after all. It may have been a producer, a casting director, or somebody else's poor choice. It wouldn't be counted against you, but try and break signed paper with the studio, especially with someone like Joel Silver. You're going to get blacklisted at every studio and spend the rest of your miserable life servicing table at the Hooters restaurant. So, get fired. Do something on set to get yourself fired, but don't quit. Find a nice way to get fired that nobody would blame you for. With these words of wisdom from Carl, Michel and Van Damme went back home and crafted a devious plan. Actually, it was Michel Kissy's idea. He was full of it. Unfortunately, Jean-Claude would never acknowledge or credit him for it, too much of a legacy to protect. So the idea was rather simple and yet effective. Since the Predator's red costume was so badly designed, meaning it was impossible to breathe in, it was hot and suffocating, every time John McTiernan, the director, would call action, Jean-Claude would simply drop. Every single time John wanted Van Damme to act, he just dropped on the ground. Action, drop. Action, Van Damme drops down and plays dead. It was driving John mad, slowly realizing that it must have been the costume that made Van Damme faint the moment he wanted him to act. Don't forget, it was high humidity and hot temperatures. They were in the jungle after all. This was a perfect strategy. Nobody suspected Van Damme of pretending. It was very convincing and incredibly believable. Probably one of his best acting moments ever, and it wasn't even on film, the irony. With time and popularity, the story wasn't made public because no actor wants to admit they deliberately sabotaged the shoot to get out from under contractual obligations. This isn't something one wants to be known for, and later, with the career and celebrity status, this would be buried and forgotten as if it never happened. More than 30 years after the stunt, Michel Kissy would finally break the story and share it with fans and followers. There is no harm in it anymore. Jean-Claude's prime in the movie industry is long gone, and I highly doubt the story can make any dent in his reputation or put his future opportunities at risk. Michel and Van Damme parted ways long time ago, right after Lionheart movie, their last joint collaboration, and frankly ending both of their careers. But for us fans, it made possible for Kissy to tell those incredible stories without putting much lipstick on it or spinning yet another fairy tale to please Hollywood. He has little reason to add unnecessarily colors to the events that took place when movies were still fun and entertaining to watch. They were made by the industry that still wanted fans to see and explore the exciting world of fantasy, free of the agenda. Movies were made for fans and we appreciated the effort, something that is often lost nowadays. But hey, there is still hope for the wheel of time to go round and bring us back to the moment when all that matters for the good feeling of audience leaving the theater, wondering what will come next and how soon can we get that sensation of "this was great." Time, popcorn and money well spent. Thank you for watching and come back again for yet another story from good old days.
You son of a bitch.